know this awkward moment all too well. What do you do when the check comes and you haven't yet discussed who is going to pay? If you're on a date, is it the responsibility of the one who asked you? What if you've been sitting at the table the longest? Well, our national etiquette expert, Cynthia Grosso, is here to help with everything we need to know about paying the check. And I feel like these days, this topic it can get heated.
Yeah,
I feel like I hear so much about tipping everywhere you go. There's more tipping than usual, right?
Mm-hmm. Ever since COVID, there's more tipping than usual.
Yeah.
It's true. It is true.
Yeah, so what are the, we'll get to splitting the check, but I want to start with tipping. Where should we be tipping? What are the types of things we should be tipping for and how much?
Sure. So tipping is, first of all, know that tipping is for service well done. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it can be that we have good service. And I don't really, some people say if I didn't have good service, I don't tip at all. I don't do that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's not the server's fault.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, whatever other reason might be. So, okay, maybe if you want to do a little lower tip, fine, but I'm not that way because, again, I don't feel that's the server's issue sometimes. But pretty much somewhere between 15 and 20%.
Yeah.
If you're occupying a table, like you said, I would go more on the tip because that table is not turning over, which is keeping that server.
Yeah.
Servers depend on tips.
Yeah.
So I would tip more if I'm occupying the table longer. Also know that tip is not, people oftentimes look at the check, they look at the bottom and they tip on that.
Yeah.
When you look at the bottom, that is food plus tax.
Yeah.
The tip is not on the tax. The tip is on the food only. So you have to pay attention and say, not just the bottom line, look at what the actual food is and tip on that. Because in Charleston, we have, about 10% tax on food by the time. So just kind of be aware of that. It's not, you don't tip on the tax, you only tip on the food.
Yeah, and like we said, more tipping than before, but I feel like a lot of us used to think restaurants, food service places, you would see those tippings, but now if you go to even just an ordinary store, like I went to a corner store recently and, they asked for a tip and stuff like that. So like where do you draw the line there?
I think we really tried during COVID to help servers and restaurants who were being hurt by things, and so I think tipping got out of hand almost. So I feel like if you go into a restaurant and you go into a lunch place, for example, I know I'm thinking one in my head, I go to the counter, I order on a kiosk in the restaurant, I pick it up from the counter where they made it, and then I throw my stuff away in the trash can, I don't leave any tip. And so if it's just a matter of people behind the counter serving, I don't worry so much about it, or if I have some loose change or a change I got back, I might stick that. But I don't worry so much about that if I'm doing all of the service quite work. I don't worry about it.
Is that the same with takeout?
With takeout, if people are, yes, if you're in the restaurant doing takeout, yes. And if you're doing DoorDash but that's lots of times that's listed already on, you can see what people are tipping, but I still do recommend if you're going to do that, a tip for, somebody bringing you a pizza or DoorDash. I do recommend tipping that. Yeah. But I do think in an establishment where you're doing all the service work, what a server would do for you, then no, because we don't tip the kitchen. In a restaurant, you tip the service. So
interesting.
And it is kind of a debate in the restaurant industry on the kitchen and the tips that the servers are getting. So it is kind of a debate, and we see that when I do hospitality etiquette training, it is a conversation we have about front of house and back of house kind of.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that I think we've all been getting used to since the pandemic for sure. What about splitting the check? This is something that I'm sure a lot of us have done if we're in a big group and we're out eating. Are you supposed to split the check at all? Is that okay?
Well, sometimes restaurants don't like to split the check. And so there's kind of an understanding up front, so that if you're in a group and you say we're all going to go and we're going to go, they're not going to split the check, we'll split that. You have to understand that up front. Or if they're okay with it, you let them know up front. Don't wait till the end to say separate checks. Do it in the very beginning so that when they take the order, it's all done individually. Don't do it, if you do it at the end, that's really a problem much of the time for servers. So, but if you're invited as part of a work host and even personal or professional environment, if you're even personal on a date, if you invite someone out for dinner on a date, that person who invited is expected to pay, whether that's a man or a woman inviting. And then for business, the same way. In business, if you're the host, you're expected to pick the restaurant and to pay, and there's other responsibilities that in business a host has. But that's different than coworkers. Coworkers, you go out for lunch, you're expected to have your own check. But there are times, host-guest event, the host pays.
Yeah, I think even in the younger generation, I feel like I hear more and more my friends will say, he didn't pay on the date. I mean, that's tough.
Yeah, it is tough on the date, and that's a personal thing.
Yeah.
So I personally would like that, for them to pay on the date if they invited me. Now, if you're dating for a while, that's different. There might be an event that you go to or an event that you go out several times and you decide to split the check. I mean, that part is fine. So, but it's just, again, the communication of understanding, who's doing what. And so that feelings aren't hurt. Now, sometimes, if I'm out with a friend, sometimes I'll say, you know what, I'll get it this time, you get it next time.
Yeah.
And that's also another way. If people don't like to split the check or whatever, I have a friend I do that with a lot.
Yeah.
It's your turn this time, and that's fine. That's acceptable as well.
Yeah, if you have that mutual trust with that person and you're communicating that's what you want to do.
Yes, or we have events where people might not drink and some people do, and then if you didn't do a separate check, then you're paying for alcohol, and there are times where you might say, well, you know what, you guys had the drinks, why don't you leave the tip? We'll split it, but you leave the tip.
Yep.
Because drinks can add up if you're not a drinker and you're splitting it all around. So there's ways to handle that, but I think it's, again, communicating and oftentimes up front.
Definitely. Well, Cindy, this is such a hot topic right now, so thank you so much for being our expert on this. And if people have questions about this, where can they reach out to you?
My email,
Awesome.
charlestonschoolofprotocol.com, and all the information, just hit contact us and it's all there.
Awesome. Cindy, thank you so much.
Thank you.